The distress signal screamed through the void for 17 seconds. Then silence. Arya Kale listened to that silence now, playing the recording for the 43rd time, her fingers hovering over the console of the Void Breaker. 17 seconds of pure terror. Captain Voss's voice breaking, crew members shouting coordinates that made no sense, and then nothing. The Xiphos fleet, 12 ships, 4,000 souls, swallowed by the Carrion expanse like they never existed. Fleet Command had called it a lost cause. They had sent 3 rescue teams. None returned. They had deployed probe drones by the hundreds. Every single one vanished the moment it crossed into the expanse. After 6 months, they declared the Xiphos fleet officially dead. But Arya knew better. She could feel them. The Voidbreaker's engines hummed beneath her feet as she crossed the threshold into the expanse, the boundary where mapped space ended and nightmare began. The viewport filled with colors that hurt to look at, nebulae twisted in acid greens and bruised violets, cosmic dust catching starlight and bending it into patterns that seemed almost alive. Beautiful. Terrifying. Wrong. Her console flickered. The standard navigation systems went dark first, exactly as the reports had warned. Then the communication array died, cutting her off from Fleet Command mid-sentence. She was alone now, truly alone, in a region of space that had never released anything it caught. Arya closed her eyes and listened. Not with her ears. With something deeper, something her father had recognized in her when she was 7 years old. He had called it the resonance, an ability to perceive vibrations beyond normal human range, to feel the pulse of energy that most people couldn't even imagine existed. She had spent her childhood thinking she was broken, hearing things that weren't there, feeling rhythms in the walls of their apartment that no one else noticed. Her father had been the only one who understood. "You're not broken," he had told her the night before his final mission. "You're evolved. Someday, you'll need this gift. Someday, it will save lives." He had disappeared into the expanse 3 weeks later. His ship was never found. Now Arya opened her eyes, her heart pounding. The vibrations were there, faint, distant, but unmistakable. A rhythm pulsing through the void like a heartbeat, calling to her from somewhere deep within the nebulae. The Xiphos fleet wasn't dead. They were trapped. And she was going to find them. Hours passed like years. The expanse played tricks on every sense. Shadows moved when nothing existed, lights flickered at the edge of vision, and the silence pressed against her skull with almost physical weight. Arya's fingers never stopped moving across the sensor array, adjusting, recalibrating, chasing the vibrations deeper into the void. The pulse grew stronger with each passing hour. It had a pattern now, a rhythm she was beginning to understand. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. Something intelligent had created it, or something intelligent was responding to her. She thought about turning back. The Void Breaker's fuel reserves were dropping steadily, and every kilometer deeper meant less chance of escape. But she had crossed this point before, in other missions, in other dangers, and she knew what happened when she listened to fear instead of instinct. People died. People like her father, alone and forgotten in the dark. A new pulse hit her senses, sharp, urgent, different from the steady rhythm she had been tracking. Arya's hands froze over the console. This wasn't the fleet. This was something else. Something that had noticed her. The nebulae outside the viewport shifted, their colors darkening from green to something closer to black. The Voidbreaker's hull groaned, metal straining against pressure that shouldn't exist in a vacuum. Warning lights flickered across the console, hull integrity fluctuating, power systems unstable, navigation completely dead. Arya forced herself to breathe. Panic meant death. Calm meant survival. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "When everything goes wrong, trust what you feel, not what you see." She closed her eyes again and reached for the vibrations. They were everywhere now, surrounding her ship, pressing against the hull, probing for weakness. But beneath the chaos, the steady heartbeat of the fleet still pulsed, closer than before. She could almost see them in her mind, ghost ships drifting in impossible stasis, their crews frozen in time, waiting for rescue that had never come. Until now. Arya opened her eyes and made her choice. She diverted all power to the engines, killing life support to minimal levels, shutting down every non-essential system. The void breaker lurched forward, diving deeper into the expanse at maximum thrust. The entity, or whatever it was, screamed in frequencies she felt rather than heard, but she was faster. She had always been faster when it mattered. The first ship materialized out of nothing, its outline shimmering like heat rising from desert sand. Then another. Then another. 12 vessels hung suspended in the void, perfectly preserved, their running lights still glowing with emergency power. The Xiphos fleet, found at last. Arya's hands trembled as she brought the void breaker to a stop. 4,000 people were on those ships, engineers, soldiers, scientists, families. 4,000 people who had been given up for dead, written off as acceptable losses in humanity's endless expansion across the stars. But she could see them through the viewports of the nearest ship, figures frozen mid-motion, faces locked in expressions of confusion and fear. They weren't dead. They were waiting. The vibrations pulsed stronger here, forming a web of invisible energy that wrapped around each ship like a cocoon. Arya analyzed the pattern, her mind racing to understand what she was seeing. The stasis field wasn't destroying the fleet, it was preserving it. The entity, whatever it was, had captured these ships like specimens in a collection, holding them in perfect suspension while time continued outside. A voice crackled through her console, fragmented, barely audible. Anyone? Trapped? Can't. Arya's heart stopped. The communication array was dead. Nothing should be reaching her. But the voice continued, desperate and fading. Please, 17 days, can't move, help. 17 days. The fleet had been missing for 6 months, but to them, only 17 days had passed. The stasis field was distorting time itself, trapping them in a pocket of frozen moments while the universe aged around them. Arya grabbed the console and forced words through dry lips. This is Arya Kale of the Void Breaker. I hear you. I'm here to get you out. Static. Then, a different voice, stronger, commanding. Kale. This is Captain Voss. You shouldn't have come. It's watching. It knows you're here. The darkness moved. Arya saw it through the viewport, not a shape, exactly, but an absence of light that flowed between the ships like liquid shadow. It had no eyes that she could see, no face, no body that made sense in three-dimensional space. But it was alive. It was intelligent. And it was curious. The vibrations changed frequency, becoming something almost like language. Not words, concepts. Images that flashed through Arya's mind without her consent. She saw stars being born and dying in accelerated time. She saw civilizations rising across the galaxy, building great empires, and then vanishing without trace. She saw the expanse itself, ancient and patient, collecting fragments of every species that dared to cross its borders. The entity was a collector, a preserver. It kept what it caught because it found mortality fascinating. These brief, fragile creatures that burned so bright and died so quickly. The fleet wasn't a prisoner. It was an exhibit. And now, the collector had found a new specimen. The shadow flowed toward the void breaker, wrapping around the hull with casual possession. Arya felt the cold seeping through the metal, felt her own body slowing as the stasis field began to take hold. Her fingers grew heavy on the console. Her thoughts scattered like leaves in wind. No. She forced her hand to the resonance amplifier, a device she had built herself, designed to project the vibrations she felt internally into external frequencies. It was experimental, untested, possibly useless. But it was all she had. The amplifier hummed to life, broadcasting Arya's own biorhythm into the void at maximum intensity. The effect was immediate. The shadow recoiled, its formless mass rippling with something that might have been surprise. For the first time in millennia, something had pushed back. Arya pressed harder, pouring every ounce of her gift into the amplifier. She projected not just vibrations, but meaning, determination, defiance, the desperate will to survive that had driven humanity across the stars despite every obstacle. She showed the entity what humans were: fragile, yes, but relentless. Temporary, but unforgettable. The shadow trembled. The battle lasted hours. The entity pushed, and Arya pushed back. Every time the stasis field crept closer, she amplified her resonance, forcing it to retreat. Every time her strength faltered, She thought of the 4,000 lives depending on her and found reserves she didn't know she had. But she was losing. The amplifier was overheating, its systems never designed for continuous output. Her own body was failing, exhaustion and cold sapping her concentration. The entity was patient. It had captured civilizations. It could wait for one human to break. And breaking she was, moment by moment, her vision blurring at the edges. Captain Voss's voice crackled through again. Kale, listen to me. You can't beat it alone. You need to synchronize with us, all of us. The stasis field is connected to our ships. If we push together. Arya understood instantly. The entity had made a mistake. By linking the fleet together in its preservation web, it had created a network, and networks could be hijacked. She broadcast new instructions through the resonance amplifier, not fighting the entity now, but reaching past it to the frozen crews. She touched their minds with her gift, waking them from stasis just enough to feel what she felt. Hope, determination, the electric thrill of possible victory. Across 12 ships, 4,000 hearts began to beat in synchronization with hers. The entity screamed. It was a sound that existed beyond hearing, a vibration that shook the nebulae themselves and sent ripples cascading through the void. The shadow convulsed, its hold on the fleet weakening as thousands of human wills pushed against it simultaneously. The stasis field flickered, sparked, and then shattered like breaking glass. The Xiphos fleet lurched back into motion. Chaos erupted across every channel. Ships powered up engines that had been dormant for months, navigation systems rebooted, and 4,000 voices shouted in confusion and relief. Arya's console blazed with incoming transmissions, damage reports, status updates, desperate pleas for direction. She took command without hesitation. All ships, follow my heading. Maximum thrust. Do not stop for anything. The entity is weakened but not dead. We have minutes before it recovers. The fleet responded. 12 ships aligned behind the Void Breaker, their engines firing in unison, driving toward the edge of the expanse with everything they had. Behind them, the shadow gathered itself, its rage palpable even across the void. The race lasted an eternity compressed into 20 minutes. The entity pursued, its formless mass stretching across the nebulae, grasping at the fleeing ships with tendrils of darkness. Twice it caught stragglers, pulling them back toward stasis, and twice Arya amplified her resonance to drive it away. Her nose bled from the effort. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the controls. But she refused to stop. The boundary of the expanse appeared on sensors, a shimmer of normal space, mapped stars, safety. One by one, the Xiphos ships crossed the threshold, their crews cheering as communication with fleet command restored and the entity's influence faded. Arya was the last to cross. She felt the shadow's final grasp on her hull, its desperate attempt to claim at least one prize from this unprecedented defeat. For a heartbeat, she hung between darkness and light, the cold of stasis creeping into her bones. Then she was through. The Void Breaker burst into charted space, its hull scarred and its systems failing, but intact. Behind her, the expanse sealed itself once more, the entity retreating to nurse its wounds and wait for the next visitors who dared to enter its domain. Arya collapsed against the console, tears streaming down her face. She had done it. Against every odd, against an intelligence older than human civilization, she had done the impossible. Fleet Command received them like heroes. Every ship that had been written off as lost returned to port with crews alive and stories that would become legends. Captain Voss personally escorted Arya from the Void Breaker, his arm around her shoulders as she walked on legs that barely functioned. The celebrations lasted for days. Arya's name was transmitted across every inhabited world, the woman who tracked the invisible, who faced the ancient darkness and won. Medals were offered. Promotions. Command of her own fleet. She refused them all. In a quiet moment, standing at the viewport of the command station orbiting Earth, Arya looked out at the stars and felt the familiar pull of vibrations from distant reaches of space. The entity was still out there. There were other mysteries in the void, other lost souls waiting to be found. Her father had disappeared into the expanse, and she had never found his ship. But she had proven something vital. Humans could survive where others failed. Humans could see what others could not. And as long as she was alive, she would keep searching. Captain Voss found her there, staring at the endless dark. "They are calling you the Void Hunter," he said. "The first human to rescue anything from the expanse. You could retire right now, live comfortably for the rest of your life." Arya smiled, but her eyes never left the stars. The expanse is just one mystery. The universe is full of them. Someone has to keep looking. Voss nodded slowly. "Your father would be proud." The words hit her harder than she expected. For a moment, her composure cracked, and she felt the grief she had been carrying for a decade rise to the surface. But she breathed through it, the way her father had taught her, and let it settle into something quieter, not pain, but purpose. "He taught me that humans notice what others miss," she said. "That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act anyway. I'm just following his example." 3 weeks later, a new distress signal reached Fleet Command. A research station in the Outer Rim had gone silent, its last transmission describing anomalies that matched the patterns Arya had encountered in the Expanse. The Brass wanted to send full fleet, but the station was deep in uncharted territory, too dangerous for large-scale operations. They needed a single ship, a specialist, someone who could perceive what normal senses could not. Arya stood in the briefing room, the mission file glowing on the table before her. The Void Breaker had been repaired and upgraded, its resonance amplifier now hardwired into the primary systems. She had a crew this time, handpicked volunteers who had survived the Expanse and wanted to follow her into the next unknown. Fleet Admiral Chen studied her across the table. "This mission is voluntary. After what you've been through, no one would blame you for sitting this one out." Arya picked up the mission file and smiled. "Admiral, I didn't survive the Expanse to spend the rest of my life behind a desk. There are people out there who need help, and I'm the best chance they've got." Chen nodded, a rare hint of respect in his weathered features. "Then Godspeed, Commander Kale. Bring our people home."